Well, today I have a chance to I have an opportunity to give a sermon, and the title of my sermon is Disciples Helping Each Other. Disciples Helping Each Other. And we're going to be spending most of our time almost exclusively in the book of Acts. Let's turn to Acts chapter 1. We'll read a few verses in Acts, the first chapter. Disciples helping each other. Well, the reason why I'm talking about this is when we have so much things going around us, so many challenges in life, internationally, nationally, maybe even in the community, depending on where you live. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. Those of us who believe in Satan, the devil, believe he's active, and we want God's help to deal with that. We want the armor of God to deal with that. And I'm working on a sermon. I almost gave that one today, but I'll give it another time, where that sermon is going to be fallible people making good decisions. And of course, that sermon will be about that I'm fallible, you're fallible, we make mistakes, but even though we make mistakes, we can still make good decisions. We can do good deeds. We can do the right thing. So if you ever get down on yourself, like what kind of a person you are, you're disappointed that you don't please God more, you and I still have the ability to make good choices. We get to help people, and we need to take advantage of that. Another benefit of that sermon when I give it will be that the people we deal with also are very weak, flawed people. Flawed people make good choices, can make good choices. So everyone, we're flawed. The people we deal with are flawed. We try to cut them slack when they make good choices. We try to deal with them when they don't make good choices. But we can so have more tolerance toward people. Plus also, again, we can make sure that we don't get so down on ourselves. We can repent before God, and we want to make good choices every single day of our life. See, because all that's happening in the world today, to me it's very important that I make good choices. That's my goal, to make good choices. That's the relationship I have with my spiritual father. I can't change what everyone else is doing. I can't change corruption. I can't change behind-the-scenes activities. I can't change any of that. I can't change anybody's behavior. In my life, I just want to make good choices, and I want to encourage you the same thing. And so what this is talking about today specifically is disciples helping other people. That we have a chance to help people, and I want to show you from just the book of Acts as we review it from the book of Acts today. I want to show you again what they lived like, how they lived. You know, one of the things I should mention, we're glad that the internet's working well. There was a couple weeks it wasn't working well. And through the years, we've had buffering and problems. With a change of equipment, looks like we've got improved service again. And Neil, Andrew, and others are going to stay on top of that to keep good service, because we know a lot of people with COVID, etc., want to stay home, and we support that. So we'd like the messages we give here, and we'd like those messages to be in the homes of other people. So we're glad that can happen. But I know, like my friends like Ruth Rowe and Elaine Townsend and others who are staying in because of their being cautious, and with their family want them to be cautious. By the way, greetings to you ladies. The one thing, they get to hear the messages, but they don't get the fellowship. They don't get the fellowship here. They can have fellowship, people come and go at their house, their schedule, their control. But we have a chance for good fellowship here. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy the snacks. Thank you very much for making the snacks for us. I really appreciate that. But I just appreciate the chance of disciples helping people out. So I thought I'd go through today the book of Acts to show you just some examples of how they work together, because hopefully we're doing the same thing. Acts chapter 1, verse 12, they all returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem. It was a Sabbath day's journey. Now when they got there, they went to an upper room, and who was at the upper room? Well, the 11 disciples. The 11 disciples were there, and of course they're about in the story to replace Judas, but they had not quite done it yet, so they're there, and they're there also, verse 14. The women were there because there were a lot of converted, dedicated women. They were the ones at the cross who was there when Jesus was dying. When many of the men who could not emotionally handle what was going on went back to fishing or back to wherever, A lot of these women were there supporting Jesus' mother, supporting Mary, but there was a strong in the faith were a core of these women. So in verse 14, they were there, and Mary, the mother, was there, and Jesus' brothers were there too. Verse 15 says there were about 120 people. So again, 120 people. It's never been about numbers. I know in the book of Acts, the church grew, expanded wildly, thousands and thousands of people. But at the beginning here, 120 people. And so again, for many of you at home, either at your home privately as a family or home in small fellowships, or if you hear this later as a DVD, again, you have a small fellowship of 15 people, 30 people. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a smaller group of people. It's kind of cozy. But no matter what size we are, we want to make sure we're disciples helping other people. Helping other people in our group, helping other people in our neighborhood, helping people when we have the opportunity. Acts chapter 2, verse 2. On the day of Pentecost was fully come. Acts 2:22, and suddenly there came a sound from heaven as a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Now, I don't believe were all 120 sitting in a house, or were they sitting in an upper room somewhere, or were there a variety of houses? I'm just reading the English words from the Bible here. They were sitting in a house. They were cozy together, spending time together. The New Testament church was about to launch, and they were enjoying each other's company. Chapter 4, verse 32. Here's how much they enjoyed each other's company. They were in this together. In one sense, it was them against the world. They shouldn't have had anything against the world. They should not have any condemnation for the world. They really shouldn't have been looking for conflict with the world, but they were small in number, yet just about ready to explode. And they liked each other. And they made a commitment to each other. And I'm telling you, friends, that's the kind of thing you can have today. I'm not going to recommend you imitate Acts 4 exactly, which people use as a form of socialism. And again, someone could say, Dave Haver's reading Acts 4. He's wanting the church to do this. He's wanting the church to mortgage their homes. He's wanting the church members to sell their homes and give him all the money. No, I'm sure there are preachers out there who would use Acts 4 to say that, but I can assure you I'm definitely not saying that. I'm going to read Acts 4 for a point of history of what they did. And I'm not saying we should do exactly the same thing. In fact, I'm happy if you can own a home. I'm happy if you can own 2 cars. I'm happy if you can put away some retirement funds, even though no telling how the world's going to crater here. I'm happy for you to take care of your family, but the attitude of helping other people is not dependent upon you giving up everything you have. I don't think you should give up everything you have. Please do not move to a commune. Please do not go to communal living where you give up your rights. Don't go anywhere following a leader, and next thing you know, they're telling you how to save, how to spend, how to live. It has happened too many times in all forms of religion, and even some Church of Gods have done this kind of thing. Now, I just told you what not to do, but I'm going to read what it says here, because one thing they did have was love for each other. They had a heart for each other to help each other, and we do want that. We do want the love for each other. We do want the heart for each other, but you need to keep control of your life, and don't ever give control over to a religious organization. Do not ever give control over to a charismatic leader. Don't ever do that, because you're taking personal responsibility before God. But as you take personal responsibility for God, at least notice in this history the love they had for each other. Acts 4, verse 32. Now the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. I sometimes have called people my soulmate. In many ways, my wife is a true soulmate. Not all marriages can say that, but my wife and I think alike in so many ways. Not only religiously, but also in worldview. And if you don't have the same worldview of your spouse, God still helps you make it work. You get to be a good, loving servant, and you get to be helpful in that. I've told many of you before that some of you are my soulmate on certain issues. And I made the statement, I'll make it again. I have people who have a different answer to these questions are still my friends and still my associates. But I am connected more to people to answer these two questions: what is the church and what is a minister? If you and I have slightly different answers, we're still friendly, we still have a relationship. But the people who answer those two questions the same way I answer those questions, I am a little more connected to. I don't show favoritism toward those people. I'm just saying we're more connected. What is the church and what is a minister? What is a servant? And again, so thereby you can see why I don't make connection with some of the other churches of God, because they don't have the same view of the church as I do, and they don't have the same view of the clergy that I do. And so thereby, because I don't respect their clergy, they obviously don't have much use for me. I do love watching people serve. I like watching men and women serve in many, many ways, without title, without a claim, without a class system. Not only serve in congregations, but they serve their community, and they're willing to serve every way possible. Disciples helping each other. Disciples helping other people. So anyway, they were of one heart and one soul. Neither did anyone say that anything he possessed was his own. So they actually went farther than I would recommend we go. But they did it. That's the history. They had all things in common. We don't have all things in common. I'm not on your bank account, don't want to be on your bank account, and you're not on mine. But with great power they gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Verse 34, nor was there anyone among them who lacked. Now that I do, without having their arrangement, we should be looking out for each other's needs. We don't have to have their exact arrangement, but we should have their heart. Now, all the possessions of land, they sold their land, they sold their houses, they put all the proceeds and dropped it at the feet of the apostles. And again, we don't do that. But they wanted a distribution among that. And certainly, again, we do have a budget, we do have an assistance fund. And when you contribute to our assistance fund, we do help people in our congregation, outside our congregation. If I had access to a whole lot more money, if I had 100 times the amount in our budget, I would help that many people, because there's so much hurting in this world. But my job is whatever you as a congregation, as a board, give me access over a certain amount of money. You help out people privately, which is great, but we help out people as a congregation based on the funds that you give to me to oversee in my area, and I have to live within that budget. But we try to find the needs of people. We try to help people. Now, there was a guy named Barnabas, verse 36. And I've given a sermon on Barnabas. I'll probably give it again here soon. The word Barnabas means son of encouragement. And I hope that you're all like Barnabas. I hope when people look at you in the congregation, you are a Barnabas, that you are just an encouraging person. I hope all our presenters, when we give messages, I hope we give encouraging messages. Yes, we recognize the negative in this world. Yes, we recognize the evil in this world, because we don't want to be caught flat-footed. We want to at least see what's going on. But we want our thrust to be sons and daughters of encouragement. We want to be encouraging everybody. But I hope again we have that love for each other. Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. The number of the disciples grew and multiplied so much that there was a complaint against the Hebrews, because the widows were being neglected. So because the widows were being neglected, they came up with a system to have people serve the widows while they would go ahead and continue preaching the Word of God. And again, we have people helping the widows here as well. We don't have as many helpers as we had years ago, and a lot of our helpers are old. There was a time if someone needed something done in a house, people from churches would do work parties and work on that. But our numbers are smaller, and by the way, we're older. There were days when we have roof problems, we'd have people climbing up on the roof helping to roof somebody's house. Looking at this audience here, maybe John Harris could climb on a roof. He said yes, he could still do it. Tolton could climb on a roof. No, Neil's shaking. He said, no, Neil's still off the roof. Neil's still off the roof. Maybe Reg could, I don't know. But I don't know how good you are with a hammer anyway, Reg. So, but Lisa Smith said she can still climb on the roof, and she probably could. But the point is, a lot of us are older, so we used to do big work parties for the widows. Well, sometimes we have to rely on the Andrews of the world and the Zacks of the world and the Toltons of the world. We have to rely on them to do that because they're younger. But again, they're busy. All these people are busy. There's only so much we can do. But again, we want to, even if we don't do their exact system like they did in the book of Acts, we want to have a love for people, helping people. Acts chapter 8, verse 1. I'm not reading all the places in the book of Acts, but we're hitting a lot of them. Acts 8, verse 1 was after the stoning of Stephen. Saul was consenting to the death. But then it said, notice this phrase, at that time a great persecution arose against the church which was at Jerusalem. And the brethren were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. The brethren were scattered, except the apostles stayed back in Jerusalem. The apostles stayed back to face the persecution. The members were scattered for their safety. Now, we know that's history. We see that as history. I have an opinion. I have an opinion what happened to the corporate churches of God back in the 1995. Part of that to me was, this may not be actually true, but I believe part of the downsizing of the church was to allow individuals to have a personal relationship with God for what was coming ahead. You say, well, that's been a long time ago. Well, many times God has worked within 70-year cycles. So if he's worked in 70-year cycles, or other times, if certain people went into captivity for 70 years, what was done in 95 could have been a prelude to what's even about to happen now. Certainly, even with this COVID thing, even more and more people are spending more time at home, watching on TV, watching on the internet. And of course, someday that may not happen. Maybe there won't be some congregations with buildings. There might be some day where people are meeting in houses. Those things may happen. And that would be for the protection of the people. If civil governments get more against churches, if they get more against churches, people will hide a little bit in how they worship God. Not hide out of fear, but hide out of wisdom. Because we're not to be afraid, and there are times to take stands. In fact, if you read the Edifying the Body article this week, Michael Brown, a black preacher, gives some suggestions about how to help take a stand in a wise way. There are wise ways to take stands. And again, I'm all for taking a stand. I've tried to do that my whole life, and I've tried to do that even now, to take stands, but I want to take wise stands. I want to do things in a proper fashion. So that article may be helpful for you to read about, even though it's to pastors, it's all of you are servants of God. And maybe the information could be helpful in edifying the body in the back table. If I need to make more copies, I will. But it might give you a suggestion of how to deal with when to take a stand, how to take a stand. But again, when you take a stand, we have to be wise about it. We have to be appropriate about it, just like they had to be back then. Chapter 9, verse 26. Saul was converted on the road to Damascus. Verse 26, when Saul had come to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they didn't want him. They did not want him. Now, I can understand the point of view of the disciples. I'm being honest with you when I say, if there are certain people who all of a sudden started keeping the way of God, I wouldn't trust them right away. I would not. They'd have to earn my trust. Am I saying that's great? No, I'm just saying it's true. So I understand when Saul, who was killing Christians, Saul, who was throwing people in jail. See, if someone threw Reg Killingly in jail, and then later on tries to come to the congregation, I would remember, you threw my friend Reg Killingly in jail. I don't trust you right now. And so I understand that, and Saul had to understand it too. And someone could say, yeah, but God called him. No, I can't. If God works in someone's life, that's great. But I may be slow to accept it. My acceptance is not the most important thing. I'm just saying my acceptance, it comes into play in my relationship with that person. They may have a perfect relationship with, Saul may have had a perfect relationship with God, and he'd go home and say, boy, that Dave Havir, he's really leery about me. And he should understand that why I would be leery. And hopefully I would be wise enough to realize God is working with Saul. His throwing Reg Killingly in jail was a mistake, an error, and I heard he apologized to Reg, and I heard he helped make it right. But again, I'm just telling you honestly, when I read that they were afraid of him, I'm sure I would be too for a while. And quite frankly, I think many of you would be pretty similar. But anyway, look who comes on the scene, verse 27. But Barnabas took him, the son of encouragement. Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. And Barnabas declared to them how he had seen the Lord on the road and how the Lord had spoken to him. And Barnabas said, but he preached boldly in Damascus in the name of Jesus. So again, Barnabas was a peacemaker. Barnabas was an encourager. Barnabas knew why people were not trusting Saul at this point. He knew why people, but he thought, you know what? Come on, folks. Let's accept him. Let's work with him. Because again, Barnabas was a great guy to help each other. And I hope all of us have a little bit of Barnabas in us. We recognize things, but we're willing to work for the positive and for the good. Then we can look down to verse 36 through 39. Here they were at Joppa, and a lady named Tabitha, it's translated Dorcas, and she was full of good works, charitable deeds, but she became sick and she died. And she was raised from the dead. Peter came along and raised her. God raised her through Peter. But the thing I want to focus on is before he raised her, the widows were weeping. They really missed Tabitha. And they were talking about, look at this. She made this tunic for me. Look at this. She made these garments for my children. Because she was so important in the congregation. And I hope that's the kind of thing we have going on in our congregation. And not only just in our congregation, but certainly a part of our congregation, where you're serving so much, you would be missed. None of us is irreplaceable. None of us is irreplaceable. But there's a lot of us who would be missed. If I pass from the scene, your life goes on easily. Some of you would miss me, and some of you would miss my preaching, and some of you would miss whatever. But believe me, your life would go on just fine. But the same could be said about you. But the thing is, we should be able to miss each other because we're making a connection of helping and serving and loving. So none of us needs to get the big head of how important we are, but all of us can play a part in that. It'd be nice that we can realize that every one of us would be missed because of the good things we did, the love of God in us, through us, toward other people. Let's look at Acts chapter 11, verse 26. This is the first time in Antioch they're called Christians. Of course, being called a Christian at that time was a put down. It was a slam. It was not a complimentary term. They are a follower of Christ. See, today everyone's called a Christian, even if they really don't follow Christ, even if they don't even follow his commandments or whatever. A lot of people are called Christians. And again, in some ways, I don't mind being lumped in as a Christian as opposed to an agnostic or an atheist. But on the other hand, there's so many differences between who are called Christians. So again, I gave a sermon series about that about a year ago. I don't mind being called a Christian, but it depends on what it means and what it applies to someone else. Yes, I'm a Christian as opposed to an atheist, but again, my brand of Christianity is different than many people's brand of Christianity, and hopefully people would be wise enough to see the good fruit of anybody. So again, then verse 27. In those days, prophets came from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them's name was Agabus, stood up and showed by the Spirit that there was going to be a great famine throughout the land. Verse 29, then the disciples, each according to his ability, determined to send relief to the brethren dwelling in Judea. Brethren sending help to other brethren, helping disciples, even in different parts of the world. At that time, they weren't that far from Judea. but even now we get to send help from time to different people. At times we've helped the brethren in Kenya, and other people have helped the brethren in Kenya. At times we've helped the people in Thailand. And again, there's ways to do it through contact. And there's ways to do it like the Church of God Seventh Day. The Church of God Seventh Day is quite large in the international areas. It's not very large in the United States, but it has good connections around the world. So sometimes if you want to do some missionary work, if you want to make some donations, there are ways to give it to someone you trust. See, I like to do that. I don't like to just send it where I don't know where it's going. I don't want to send money where it ends up in a politician's pocket in some country. I don't really want to do that. So it's through connections of people. Again, a lot of this world depends on trust and relationships. If I have a relationship with someone that I know if I send the money there, it's going to get to the party, it's going to get to the people who need it, then I'm more eager to do that. Well, they wanted to help the people in Judea. And again, hopefully we want to help our brethren around the world. Let's look at Acts chapter 16. Acts 16, a new lady came in the church. Her family too. And her name was Lydia, a very successful businesswoman. She was a leader. You heard that right, because we recognize, as the Bible does, that some of the best leaders in the church are the ladies. And so this lady was a leader. Verse 14, how a certain woman named Lydia heard us. She was a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira. She worshiped God. She was a businesswoman. She was successful. The Lord opened her heart to heed the things spoken by Paul. And when she and her whole household were baptized, she said, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come stay at my house. Well, she was a woman of means, and she was a woman of hospitality. And she wanted to serve the Apostle Paul and Timothy and others in their ministry. Now, what's important about that is after Paul goes through his big ordeal, being thrown in prison and getting out of prison, in verse 40, after they escaped all the troubles of the being in prison and the deliverance, verse 40, so they went out of the prison and entered into the house of Lydia. And when they had seen the brethren, they encouraged them and departed. They encouraged each other. And again, hopefully there's a lot of encouragement going on. Some people do not have the facilities to really host people in your home. Some people are great at hospitality. They'll have people in their home. God bless you for that. Some of you are maybe a little embarrassed about your home. Not that you should be embarrassed, but people are embarrassed about their life situations. People are more particular about that. That doesn't mean their home situation is bad. Through their eyes, they may think, oh, my house isn't good enough to do such a thing. Well, in other days, you could always take somebody out to eat, which is harder to do now, I get that. Or here at church, some of you bring snacks. You can contribute to snacks as part of your hospitality to other brethren. Because I know Lisa and Joyce would be more than happy to receive other snacks from you. And if you say you want to be hospitable to help brethren, or quite frankly, if you want to get some people and have a little snack in one of the classrooms, like church is over at 4, if you want to get together at 5 and have a little group of you here because you don't want to bring people into your home, you can still have a heart of hospitality. Just let us know. Those of us who lock up, David Coleman, Ron Havir, myself, we usually are the ones who lock up. If I know some of you want to stay here, I'll make sure you have, and I'll come back and lock the doors after you leave. In other words, don't let your house situation or the distance of traveling to each other's homes be a problem. If you want a little picnic lunch, and if you want a picnic lunch here at noon, let us know. Some of you can go in there. Now, some of us may try to crash your party, but you can tell us to get out or not get out. That's up to you. But you can have your little, in other words, you can be people of hospitality using this beautiful building. Just ask if there's a reason why we can't do it. We can't do it. Just like this week, again, I think we're gonna do a blacktop all the driveway stuff. So I know once it's decided, I need to know when, because I'll need to know I can't work in the building that day, or if they work on half of it at a time, if they work on that half, I can come in that door, or vice versa. There may be reasons why, but if there's not a reason why not to use the building for hospitality. There's a yoga, I don't know if you knew there's a yoga class in here every Thursday and Tuesday and Thursday nights. There's a yoga class. So far it's all women. And I think maybe that's the way they want it. I haven't asked to join. I just know I open the door for them sometimes. I know they're in there. I love it that these people are using the building for good things. I just love that. So again, if you want to use the building for something of hospitality, I'm all for that. Acts chapter 20, verse 7. Now it was the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread. Paul was ready to depart the next day to continue his message until midnight. So again, here he was, they're breaking bread. And verse 8, he goes long. He's long-winded. It wasn't like Neil today. Neil was short today. That was good. That was good. I was short last week in my Bible, so that was good. But sometimes we were not as long-winded as Paul. Paul spoke so long that a guy fell out 3 stories out of his window. Not good. And thankfully, if you fall out of, you only would fall on this, down off on the floor here, it would just embarrass you a little bit. If you fall asleep and fall out of your chair during one of my sermons, I can guarantee you I won't tease you that day. But the following week, look out. I'll probably bring it up later in life at the time you fall out of your chair, but I would at least cut you slack that day. So you won't have to worry about me teasing you that day. But he fell out of his chair, and verse 10, he said, don't trouble, he's okay. Verse 11, they broke bread some more, and he talked even longer. I think it's really funny. This guy fell out of his window, and Paul's like, he's okay, I got more to say. He sounds like some of the preachers I've heard in the Church of God. They just keep on going. But he kept on going, and then verse 12, the young man was alive, and I like this phrase in the English, King James, New King James, and they were not a little comforted. That sounds like a British way of saying it, if someone's happy, they say, he's quite happy. They use that word quite in their life. I like the way they do that. We're not a little comforted. It was really nice. Chapter 21, they stayed 7 days in Tyre, verse 4. Verse 5, it says, the men, women, all of them they came to the edge of the city. Verse 6, Paul got on the boat and went home. Verse 7, they stayed for a day. And we come into verse 8. Now they came to Caesarea, the house of Philip the evangelist. By the way, this is the same Philip who's listed back in Acts 6. So again, people talk about in Acts 6 where they ordained deacons. Well, Philip ended up being an evangelist. So I would just say this, the way people have ordained people using Acts 6 to have this clergy class system is really not exactly the way it was in the Bible, but that's for another day. I'm running out of time. Anyway, Agabus prophesied, verses 9 through 11, Agabus prophesied that don't go to Jerusalem. And it's like, actually Agabus prophesied there would be danger in Jerusalem. And Paul said, I want to go. And some of the disciples said, no, don't go, don't go. And Paul said, no, I think I want to go. I want to preach the gospel there. I think I want to go. And so, verse 17, when he finally went, when he came to Jerusalem, the brethren received him gladly. It's like, oh, we're glad you're here. But Paul knew when he went there, based on what Agabus said, Paul knew it was going to be trouble. He knew the time of trouble was at hand, but he wanted to go anyway. So sometimes bad things are going to happen, but if you think it's the right time to take a stand, if you think it's God's will for you to take a stand, you do so. Well, chapter 28, I'm not going to cover all of this. It's interesting enough that Paul met different people, and a lot of these people don't seem to have been believers. And I want to give you this thought as we're coming toward a conclusion. When I say helping neighbors, when I say helping other people, while you want to help people in the church of God, since we can't totally define the church of God anyway, God knows those who are his, why don't we just worry about helping people? And if we help people, we're going to someday help people, those in the church of God. We're someday going to be helping agnostics, and we might even be helping atheists someday. The thing is, it's the right thing to do, is to help. I want to go over to conclude in 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. Now, in concluding here, I want to mention this. Paul was in Rome under what I believe was house arrest, and he was trying to do what he could within the challenges he had. If you ever find yourself in house arrest, I hope you do the right thing. If you ever find yourself your liberties taken away, I hope you do the right thing. None of us want to lose our liberties, and there might be logical ways to try to keep your liberties. But if not, if we end up like situations like the Bible, we want to handle it as well as some of these Bible people handled it. I realize 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. If someone were to ask you, what is one of the verses that Dave Havir reads in 25 years? What are 5 of the verses Dave Havir read the most? This would be one of the top 5. You say, wow, why do you read it? Why do you read it so much? I think the example really is helpful to me. It's really beneficial to me. Because I've seen people like Onesiphorus. And I appreciate people like Onesiphorus. And I want to be like Onesiphorus. Well, you'll recognize the story. Like I said, I read this verse a lot. 2 Timothy, chapter 1. 2 Timothy 1, verses 16 and 17. The Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus. The fact is, to the house of Onesiphorus, some people wonder if he had died. Some people say he was alive, some people say he was dead. But the request was the household of Onesiphorus, bless his wife. You know, I would say this, if you think that I've ever done anything nice for you, ask God to bless my wife. If you think I've ever done anything nice to you, ask God to bless my family. The Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me. See, that's what I want to be, where people can look back and say, yeah, Dave Havir, he was weird, but you don't have to say that if you don't want to. But he refreshed me. He helped me. And Dave Havir wasn't ashamed of my situation. And he wasn't ashamed of my chain. If you're falsely accused, if you notice I've stood by you, that's my goal, to stand by you. Even if you've done something wrong and have been accurately accused, I especially want to be there for you whenever you need help. But I'm glad that you reciprocate toward me and the others in the flock. For when Onesiphorus arrived in Rome, he sought me out zealously. In other words, a lot of people avoided Paul like the plague. I don't want to be around Paul. I don't want to be associated with Paul. I don't want to be connected to Paul. Onesiphorus, who was a big helper to Paul in Ephesus, went to Rome, sought him out to comfort him, to show his support. Brethren, that's the kind of person you are, and that's the kind of person you want to be. You want to be true blue and loyal to people. You want to be helping people. You want to be comforting people. You want to be doing good to people. Verse 18, the Lord grant to him that he may find mercy from the Lord in that day. You know, that's a good prayer for someone. Father, that person was nice to me. That person was nice to the congregation. Father, please grant them mercy. I know they should talk to you about their own sins. I know they should have their own repentance. But Father, please cut them slack for all the good that they did for the people I see. Cut them slack for the people, all the good they did for me. You know very well how many ways he ministered to me at Ephesus. So again, brethren, I want you to realize, again, when you go through the book of Acts, probably even more slowly than we did today, go through the book of Acts and notice how much they worked together, how much they worked to serve other people. Their friends, their strangers, neighbors, people of the body of Christ, people we're not sure if they're part of the body of Christ or not, just helping other people. In a world that's negative, in a world that's fighting, in a world that's bitter, in a world that's angry, in a world that's illogical, in a world that's cruel, please don't succumb to that way of thinking. But I hope you'll have the way of thinking. Hope you'll be like Onesiphorus. And I hope you'll be like the other people in the book of Acts. I hope you'll be disciples who help each other out.